Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? The room was crowded, full of men whose laughter cut through the smoke of bad coffee and recycled air. Maps and satellite prints littered the table, red circles like blood drops marking enemy routes. The colonel spoke in a voice that belonged to command, not to mercy, but her ears weren't on him. She felt the weight of their eyes every time his orders landed, and every time her name wasn't called. They thought she was invisible. Maybe they wanted her to be. She sat still, the edge of her uniform sleeve pressed against her wrist, her notebook open but untouched. She had been through this before, the pause when her suggestion landed, the dismissive shuffle of papers, the almost smile when someone else repeated her words louder and earned the nod. But she didn't move. She had learned that silence could be its own weapon. Still, her chest tightened. Her breath wasn't steady. The night before had come back to her in flashes, the voice on the radio, the silence that followed, the blood that refused to wash off her hands. She had almost lost them, her team, her responsibility. And no one here knew. The colonel cleared his throat. We move at 300. Convoy route Bravo. Extraction in less than 20 minutes once target is secure. The table rattled as chairs pushed back, boots scraped the floor. Orders done, voices rose again. Someone cracked a joke. Another muttered about the heat. She rose slowly, eyes fixed forward, and for the briefest second one of the younger soldiers caught her gaze. His smile faltered. He looked away. Outside, the desert night pressed heavy. The stars were harsh, white, and endless, but the air was thick with dust, with diesel. She stood on the steps of the makeshift command tent, her hand lingering against the canvas flap. She wanted to scream, to break through the wall that boxed her in, but she didn't. She had made herself a promise long ago, never let them see you crack. But there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. She walked toward her quarters. The gravel shifted beneath her boots, each step a sound swallowed too quickly by the wind. She knew she wouldn't sleep. She hadn't, not properly, in weeks. Every time her eyes closed, the image returned. The child by the roadside, the way the air seemed to hold its breath, the blast that swallowed sound. She had fired without thinking, saved the convoy, but too late for the boy. Her hands shook as she unzipped the duffel by her cot. She pressed them flat against the fabric until the tremor stilled. Inside lay the rifle, polished, maintained, perfect. The one thing she trusted. She sat on the cot's edge, staring at it. The memory looped again, as if her mind wanted to test her strength by breaking it. The child's eyes, wide and waiting, just before the dust took them away. No metal could cover that. No commendation could cleanse it. She leaned forward, elbows on knees, head bowed. She wasn't praying. She had stopped believing in words like that a long time ago. But somewhere beneath the silence she searched for something, a thread, a reason, a voice. Nothing came. Footsteps echoed outside. She straightened quickly, pulling the zipper closed. The flap rustled and a figure appeared. A shadow first, then Sergeant Hale, his beard rough, his shoulders heavy with fatigue. He didn't step in. He just lingered. "You good?" he asked. The words were soft, cautious, as though he already knew the answer. She gave a nod. It was easier than admitting truth. He stayed for a moment longer, then left without pressing. She let the silence settle again. It was always like that. They didn't know how to ask, and she didn't know how to answer. Later, in the hum of the convoy's engines, she sat at the back of the armored vehicle, the rifle across her lap. Around her, the men shifted restlessly, helmets clutched, eyes scanning the darkness. She listened to their mutters, complaints about heat, fears they wouldn't name outright, someone whispering about his daughter back home who had just turned 5. That caught her. She closed her eyes, letting the sound linger, the mention of a daughter, a child. Her chest burned again. But when she opened her eyes, she was steady. Because she knew, whether they wanted to admit it or not, they counted on her. The woman they ignored at the table was the same one they trusted when the night went silent, when the wind carried whispers of danger. The convoy moved slow. The desert stretched endless, a void of sand and shadow. She kept her gaze on the horizon, scanning, reading the darkness like a second language. Every flicker, every glint, every movement mattered. She saw what others missed. That was her gift, her curse. An hour passed, two, the radio crackled, a warning, the driver tensed. She felt it before it happened, the stillness. The way the air grew heavy, expectant. She lifted the rifle, her breath sinking with her pulse. Through the scope, the world narrowed. Sand dunes curved like broken waves, the moonlight carving their edges sharp. And there, movement. A figure crouched low, something in his hands. Her finger tightened. But then hesitation. A fraction of a second. The figure looked young, too young. The image struck her, colliding with the memory she carried like a wound. Not again. Her lungs seized, her vision blurred. She blinked hard, forcing the world back into focus. Training anchored her. Instinct sharpened her. And this time she fired before doubt could claim her. The sound shattered the night. The figure fell. Silence followed. Around her, voices rose, shouts, orders, the crackle of urgency. She lowered the rifle slowly, the weight of it doubled. No one cheered. They never did, not for her. But she caught it. The glance of relief in their eyes, the way their bodies shifted with the fragile comfort of survival. The convoy kept moving. The night closed back in. She leaned her head against the cold metal wall of the vehicle, eyes shut. No one spoke to her. They rarely did after she fired. It was as if pulling that trigger turned her into something they couldn't understand, something both necessary and untouchable. But she felt it deep and sharp. The cost. Every time she saved them, she lost another piece of herself. And none of them knew the secret that gnawed at her most. The boy by the roadside hadn't been the first. Why did the silence after the shot feel heavier than the shot itself? The convoy had moved on, engines growling like tired beasts, wheels crushing gravel into dust. Yet in her chest the sound still rang. A single crack splitting the night. A life ended. Another life spared. That equation never balanced, no matter how command liked to frame it. She sat alone when they reached the outpost. The others spilled out of the vehicles in a flood of relief, stretching their backs, lighting cigarettes, muttering about chow. She walked slower, rifle slung across her shoulder, each step deliberate, as if her body carried an extra weight that no one else could see. And maybe that was true. Maybe only she could feel it. Inside the barracks, she set the rifle down carefully on the rack, her fingers lingering on the cold metal longer than necessary. Around her, the men laughed, their voices sharp and hollow, filling the air like static. No one spoke her name. No one asked how she was. But she could hear the whispers anyway. Not unkind, not cruel, but tinged with something she knew too well, unease. As if she were both shield and reminder of the things they didn't want to face. She pulled off her gloves. Her hands trembled faintly. She curled them into fists until the shaking stopped. Later in the mess hall, she sat at the corner table, tray untouched. The food smelled of overcooked rice, dry meat, and the faint sting of bleach. She wasn't hungry. Across the room, Sergeant Hale sat with two younger soldiers. They were bent over something, a picture. She caught fragments of their voices. Verse steps. Sent it yesterday. Can't believe I'm missing all this. The photo was passed from hand to hand. Smiles softened the edges of their fatigue. A brief reprieve from the war that gnawed at them. She looked away, focusing on the condensation sliding down her water glass. Her mind drifted, back to another table, another photo. Years ago, before the sand, before the rifle, she had sat in a small kitchen with peeling paint and the hum of a broken fridge. A boy had sat across from her, his hair stuck up in wild tufts, his face serious in the way only children could manage. He had drawn her a picture of an airplane, crooked lines, wings too short, but filled with the kind of imagination she'd lost too early. "You'll fly one day," he'd said proudly, "and I'll watch." Her throat tightened. She blinked, pulling herself back to the present. The mess hall noise pressed in. She rose abruptly, tray clattering, and left without a word. The night air was sharp, cooler now. She stepped into it, letting the darkness wrap around her like a cloak. The stars stared down, indifferent and endless. She found herself walking toward the perimeter fence. Beyond it, the desert stretched in silence. The wind brushed against the wire, a faint metallic song. She gripped the mesh, the metal digging into her palms. She wanted to scream into that emptiness. She wanted someone, anyone, to understand that every shot she took wasn't just a calculation. It was a wound. But when she opened her mouth, no sound came. Only a breath, ragged and shallow. Behind her, boots crunched against gravel. She turned slightly, hand instinctively brushing her sidearm. It was Hale again. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. She didn't answer. He joined her at the fence, his eyes scanning the horizon. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence stretched, not heavy this time, but almost companionable. Almost. "You saved us back there," he said finally. His tone wasn't congratulatory, not a pat on the back. It was simple fact. We all know it. She kept her gaze forward. The desert didn't flinch. "You ever think about it?" she asked suddenly, surprising herself. "What it costs?" Hale glanced at her. His face was shadowed, unreadable. Then he looked away. "Every damn day." Something flickered in her chest. A recognition. A reminder that maybe she wasn't as alone as she thought. But it was fleeting, like a spark in the wind. When he left, she stayed at the fence. Her fingers were raw by the time she let go. Sleep didn't come. When she finally lay on her cot, eyes wide open, the memories rushed in again. The boy by the roadside, the boy at the kitchen table, two images colliding until they blurred. She pressed her palms against her eyes as if she could force them apart. But they wouldn't separate. The next day, orders came down for another mission. This time it wasn't a convoy, it was a search. A village suspected of harboring insurgents. High risk, high stakes. At the briefing, the colonel's voice was sharp, precise. Targets, timelines, extraction. Her role was clear, overwatch. She would move first, unseen, eyes in the shadows, rifle ready. When he dismissed them, she lingered. The men filed out quickly, some muttering prayers, others cracking jokes to mask their nerves. She stayed behind, staring at the map. The red circle bled into the outline of the village. Something gnawed at her. Not the danger, not the possibility of failure, something else. A memory that surfaced with no warning. The last time she had walked into a village like that, there had been a girl. Barefoot, eyes wide, clutching a ragged doll. She had looked at her with something like trust. Hours later, the girl had been gone, vanished in the smoke and rubble. She touched the map. Her finger hovered over the red circle. She thought of the girl, the doll, the unspoken promise she had broken simply by being there. Her chest constricted, but she didn't move. That night, as she prepared her rifle, she paused. Her reflection in the metal was fractured, distorted. She almost didn't recognize herself. Not the soldier, not the weapon, just the eyes, tired, haunted, searching for something she couldn't name. She closed her eyes and whispered the words she never spoke aloud. "Forgive me." At 300 they moved. The night was darker than usual, clouds shrouding the moon. Their boots pressed into sand that swallowed sound. She moved ahead, her body low, rifle secure. The others followed at a distance, trusting her eyes to guide them. Every shadow felt alive. Every sound threatened betrayal. She scanned constantly, her scope painting the world in fragments. The village emerged slowly, shapes rising from the sand like ghosts. Mud walls, flickering lamps, silence, too much silence. She signaled halt. The team froze. Through the scope she studied the windows, the alleys, the rooftops. Nothing moved, but the air was heavy again, thick with expectation. Her pulse quickened. The memory of the boy, the girl, they pressed in, threatening to cloud her sight. And then movement, a figure on the roof, small, leaning forward. Her breath caught. She lifted the rifle, sight steady. The figure shifted, hands fumbling with something. She exhaled, finger tightening. But then the lamplight caught it, not a weapon, a kite, fragile, fluttering in the night air. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She froze. For one moment, one impossible moment, the war receded. The village was just a place. The figure was just a child, clutching a piece of sky. She lowered the rifle. Behind her, Hale's whisper crackled in the radio. "What do you see?" She didn't answer. Her throat had closed. Because she knew. One wrong word, one wrong assumption, and that child would never see another dawn. And she couldn't let that happen, not again. She didn't breathe, not at first. The child stood on the rooftop, holding the kite against the night wind, its frame trembling like fragile bones. The red fabric flapped, a faint, desperate sound in the silence. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't an ambush. It was just a child chasing the sky. Through the headset, Hale's whisper repeated, sharper now. "What do you see?" Her mouth was dry. Her pulse pounded in her ears. She could answer. She could say clear. She could name what she saw, but if she said the word child, she knew what would come next. Orders to confirm, orders to act, orders to eliminate a possible threat. She lowered the rifle slowly. Her finger trembled against the trigger guard. "Clear," she whispered finally. The word burned as it left her mouth. The team moved forward. She stayed frozen for a moment longer, watching the child. The kite lifted, caught the wind, and for a fleeting instant it soared. She closed her eyes, let the image burn into her mind. Then the rooftop was empty again. The mission pressed on. They moved into the village. Doorways loomed. Windows gaped like hollow eyes. She scanned each corner, each shadow, her scope slicing through the silence. The others moved carefully behind her, weapons raised, bodies tense. Then motion. A door creaked open. A figure stepped into the alley. This one wasn't a child. A man, tall, wiry, carrying something wrapped in cloth. She steadied her breath, rifle lifted. The man glanced once toward the team, eyes widening. His hands moved too fast. She fired. The crack echoed off the walls. The man dropped instantly, cloth bundle falling, splitting open on the ground. Metal spilled across the dirt, wires, tubes, the unmistakable skeleton of an explosive. The silence shattered. Voices rose. The team rushed forward, shouts filling the narrow alley. Someone cursed, another muttered thanks under his breath. The danger was real this time. The choice was clear, but it didn't ease the weight in her chest. Because behind her eyes, she still saw the child with the kite. Later, when the village was secured, when the last door had been kicked open, when the last frightened faces had been forced into corners and searched, the adrenaline drained. The radios went quiet. The men slumped against walls, sweat soaking their uniforms, eyes glazed. She stayed on the rooftop, alone again, watching the horizon. The desert stretched endless, a sea of shadows. Somewhere out there, she knew, more figures waited. More choices would come, and each one would carve deeper into her. Footsteps behind her, she didn't turn. "You saw it, didn't you?" Hale's voice was low. She didn't answer. "The kid," he pressed, "on the roof." Her jaw clenched. Slowly she lowered the rifle, letting it rest against the ledge. She exhaled. "I saw him." "And you didn't." Hale stopped himself, biting down on the words. She turned then, meeting his gaze. For once, he didn't look away. "I won't kill children," she said simply. The silence between them stretched. Hale's face hardened, but not with anger. With something else, recognition maybe, or fear. "Command doesn't see it that way," he muttered. She looked back to the horizon. The wind pulled at her hair, the night pressing close. "Command doesn't have to carry it." He didn't argue. He just stood there, the weight of his presence heavy but not unwelcome. Finally, he left, boots fatting into the night. She stayed, alone with the desert, the stars, and the unspoken truth. She was playing a dangerous game. One hesitation could save her soul or damn the mission. And she knew the others were starting to notice. The next day, rumors flickered like sparks. She caught them in passing, words traded in low tones when they thought she wasn't listening. She hesitated. Could have gotten us killed. Don't know if I trust her anymore. Each word landed like a bruise. She carried them in silence, outwardly unflinching. Inwardly, they scraped raw against the memory she refused to let go of. Because there was a reason she couldn't pull that trigger on a child. A reason buried so deep she had never spoken it aloud. Not here, not to them. It lived in the quiet moments in the space between missions, in the photograph tucked inside her vest, worn edges, faded ink, a boy's face staring up at her, hair sticking in wild tufts, eyes too bright to be forgotten. Her brother, gone before she ever put on the uniform, gone to a world that didn't care about promises or dreams or the fragile hope of a child drawing airplanes in crooked lines. She carried him with her, every step, every shot. And every time she saw a child in her scope, she saw him. The memory pressed in again that night. She sat on her cot, head bowed, the photo clutched in her hand. The barracks buzzed with voices, men laughing, telling stories, distracting themselves from what tomorrow might bring. She stayed silent. Her brother's voice echoed in her mind the way he had once said it. "You'll fly one day, and I'll watch." But he never had the chance. Her hand tightened around the photo until the paper crinkled. She closed her eyes. She had never told them. Not Hale, not command, not anyone. Her silence wasn't just habit, it was protection. Because if she let it out, if she spoke the truth, she was afraid she would break. And breaking wasn't an option. The missions continued, each one blurred into the next. Convoys, villages, overwatch, shots fired in the dark. But the whispers grew louder, trust fraying, doubt seeping. She felt it in the way they looked at her, not with contempt but with caution, as if she were both essential and dangerous. One night after a particularly long patrol, Hale stopped her as she headed back to her quarters. His face was drawn, exhaustion etched deep. "You can't keep carrying it alone," he said quietly. Her chest tightened. "I don't know what you mean." "You do," he replied. His eyes searched hers. "You're burning out, and if you burn out here, we all go with you." The words cut deep, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. She wanted to tell him about her brother, about the boy by the roadside, about the child with the kite, about the weight that pressed on her chest every time she lifted the rifle. But the words stuck, her throat closed. So she just shook her head, turned away, and walked into the dark. And in that silence she knew something would have to give, soon. Because the war wasn't slowing, the choices weren't stopping, and the weight she carried was starting to crush her from the inside. Why did the colonel say her name this time? The briefing room was the same as always, maps tacked to walls, stale coffee stinking in metal pots, voices rough with exhaustion. But today, when the orders came down, the colonel paused, looked directly at her and said it. Her name, clear, commanding. "You'll take point Overwatch, highest ground, eyes open." The others glanced at her, quick, sharp looks that carried more weight than words. She gave a single nod, controlled, measured. Inside, her stomach knotted. Because this wasn't a convoy, this wasn't a village sweep, this was different. The target was a compound, fortified, guarded, the kind of place where hesitation wasn't just dangerous, it was fatal, the kind of mission where one mistake meant not coming back. When the colonel dismissed them, she stayed behind for a moment. Her gaze lingered on the map, the red mark bleeding into the outline of walls and towers. She studied it, memorized it, but all she saw was the potential for failure. Hale waited at the doorway. "You ready?" She didn't answer at first. She just traced the edge of the compound with her eyes, following its walls like scars. Finally, she said, "I'll be there." The night moved fast, gear checked, weapons cleaned, radios synced, each movement mechanical, precise. But beneath the routine, her thoughts spiraled. She remembered the kite, the boy, her brother. The weight of every shot she'd taken pressed against her ribs. Tonight she couldn't afford that weight. Tonight she had to be steel. But steel still cracks. When they moved out, the desert was colder than usual. The moon hid behind clouds, the stars dull. Sand shifted under their boots, whispering secrets to the dark. She kept her eyes forward, her body low, every sense sharp. The compound rose from the distance like a shadow given form. Walls jagged, windows hollow, watchtowers silent, too silent. She scaled the outer ridge alone, moving like a ghost. The rifle strapped across her back was steady, but her hands itched, restless. She found her perch on the ridge, settled into the dirt, and raised the scope. The world narrowed. Through the glass she saw everything. The walls, the guards packing slowly, weapons slung lazy but ready. She counted them, lips moving soundlessly. 7. No, 8. Maybe more in the shadows. Her radio hissed, Hale's voice low. "We're in position, waiting for your call." Her throat tightened. The power of it, their lives balanced on her word, her trigger. "Stand by," she whispered. She adjusted her scope, breath steady, pulse slow. One guard stopped to light a cigarette, the flare of the match slicing the dark. Another leaned against the wall, eyes scanning the horizon without really seeing. She could end them both in seconds, clear the way, make it easy. But her finger hovered, refusing, because through the glass she didn't just see enemies. She saw faces, lines of exhaustion, the weight of someone else's orders written in their posture. She blinked hard, focused. "Take the shot," Hale's voice pressed. Her heart pounded. She inhaled, exhaled. The rifle kicked once, sharp and clean. The cigarette flared, then dropped. One guard down. Another breath, another shot, 2. The radio crackled. "Move," Hale barked. The team surged forward. She covered them, rifle shifting, eyes scanning every corner, every window. Bullets cracked back, sparks against the compound walls. Shouts erupted, chaos breaking the silence. Her body moved on instinct, training anchoring her where emotion threatened to pull her under. She fired, reloaded, fired again. Each shot precise, each one a thread in the fragile net holding the team alive. But then movement. A door slammed open. A figure rushed out, smaller than the rest. She snapped her scope up. A child. Barefoot, running. Her vision blurred, her chest seized. Not again, not this. Through the glass, the child's face swam with her brother. For a heartbeat, they were the same. Wide eyes, wild hair, fragile and fleeting. Her finger froze. "Sniper, take the shot." The voice screamed in her headset, panic bleeding through. Her hands trembled. The child stumbled, something clutched in his arms. Not a kite this time, something heavier. A pack. Her lungs locked. "Now," Hale's roar cut through the chaos. She squeezed. The world shattered. The child dropped, the pack tumbling from his arms. A muffled blast shook the ground, smaller than it could have been, deadly enough if it had reached the team. The silence after was unbearable. She lowered the rifle, her hands shaking violently. Her breath came ragged, shallow, broken. Through the scope, she forced herself to look. The child lay still, face turned away, the pack scorched beside him. Her stomach lurched. She ripped the headset off, pressing her forehead into the dirt. The sound of gunfire, shouting, movement, it all blurred into background noise. Her brother's voice filled the void instead. "You'll fly one day, and I'll watch." But he wasn't watching, he never would. She had just killed someone else's brother. The mission ended hours later. The compound was cleared, targets secured, explosives dismantled. By the time the team regrouped, the first light of dawn painted the desert in pale gray. She stayed apart, rifle slung across her back, eyes fixed on the horizon. Dust clung to her face, sweat dried on her skin, but she didn't move. The others muttered, some quietly praising her precision, others refusing to meet her eyes. None of them said the word, child. They didn't have to. The silence carried it. Hale approached. He looked exhausted, his beard thick with dust, his eyes bloodshot. He stood next to her for a long time before speaking. "You saved us." His voice was steady but softer than usual. She didn't answer. "You hesitate again next time," he continued. "We're dead, you know that." Her jaw tightened, her hands curled into fists at her sides. "I know," she whispered. But the words didn't feel true. When they returned to base, the colonel gave her a nod, just that. No medal, no speech. Just a nod that said her job was done and another would come soon. In the barracks, she lay on her cot, staring at the ceiling, the photograph pressed against her chest. Her brother's face stared back, edges worn, eyes bright. She whispered it then, so soft it barely reached her own ears. "I'm sorry." And for the first time in months, she let the tears come, silent, unstoppable. Because she knew no one else would ever understand. No medal could capture her, only the memory of silent tears that carried soldiers back alive. The compound was rubble in the rear view, but inside the transport, silence reigned. Dust clung to their uniforms, sweat glued fabric to skin. The engine hummed, wheels grinding over desert rock. No one spoke, not because they had nothing to say, but because there was too much. Words would have cracked under the weight of it. She sat near the back, rifle across her knees, helmet in her lap. Her eyes didn't move, fixed on the metal floor. Her ears rang, though there was no gunfire now, no blast. Just memory replaying itself, unrelenting. The boy's face, her brother's face. Hale sat across from her. His gaze was steady, unreadable, his hands folded, dirt etched deep in the creases. He didn't look away, didn't try to speak. Maybe he knew silence was all that kept her from breaking apart in front of them. One of the younger soldiers shifted, restless. His boot tapped the floor. Finally, he muttered, "Kid had a bomb." The words were jagged, half justification, half prayer. Another soldier snapped, "Shut up." The silence grew heavier. She closed her eyes, not because she agreed or disagreed, but because she couldn't listen, couldn't carry the weight of their voices on top of her own. When they reached base, the sun was high, the heat sharp and punishing. The squad dispersed quickly, grateful to be anywhere but together. She moved slower, the rifle heavy on her shoulder. The photograph pressed against her chest felt heavier still. In the barracks, she cleaned her weapon in silence. Every click, every brush of cloth against steel was ritual, a distraction, a desperate attempt at control. She didn't notice Hale until he sat across from her, dropping his own rifle onto the table. "You did what had to be done," he said simply. Her hands stilled, she didn't look up. "That's what they'll write in the report." Hale's jaw worked. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Doesn't make it less true." Her throat tightened. She forced herself to keep moving, to keep cleaning. "Truth doesn't help me sleep." For the first time, Hale's eyes softened. "It helps us live." The words hit harder than gunfire. Because he was right. Because every soldier who walked back through those gates owed that survival to her. And because none of them could bear the truth of why. The next day, the colonel called her in. His office was sparse. Maps pinned to walls, a single flag behind his desk, dust motes dancing in the shafts of light. He didn't waste words. "You saved the squad." His tone was flat, factual. "Good work." She stood at attention, spine rigid, hands steady. Her face betrayed nothing. The colonel studied her a moment longer, then gave a single nod. "Dismissed." That was all. No medal, no ceremony, just the weight of another mission checked off a list. Outside, the sun glared down, blinding. She blinked against it, but the light couldn't burn away the image in her head. The boy collapsing, the pack tumbling, the explosion muted but real. That night she couldn't eat, couldn't lie down. She sat alone outside the barracks, knees drawn to her chest, the desert stretching silent before her. The photograph was warm in her hands, the edges frayed, the image fatting from so many touches. Her brother's smile stared back. "I'm sorry," she whispered again, voice breaking. For a moment she let the tears fall, quiet, unnoticed, just as they always were. But even grief didn't last long here. Boots crunched on gravel. She looked up, blinking quickly, forcing the tears away. It was one of the younger soldiers, the same one who'd spoken in the transport. He hesitated when he saw her, shifting awkwardly. His voice faltered. He rubbed the back of his neck. "We're alive because of you. I know it does, I know it doesn't make it better, but thank you." Her chest ached. She wanted to say something, anything, but no words came. She just nodded once, sharp, controlled. He gave a small nod in return, then walked away, leaving her alone again. But she wasn't really alone, not anymore. The silence had changed. The squad still didn't talk about it. They didn't joke as much, didn't laugh. The air between them was heavy, charged with something unspoken. But when they moved out again, their eyes went to her. Their safety depended on her. Their lives rested in her hands. Every shot she took, every second she waited, every breath, she felt it double. Her brother on one side, the squad on the other. She carried them both. And it was breaking her. Days blurred into weeks. Missions piled on, each one bleeding into the next. Convoys, villages, compounds. Through it all, she fired when she had to, waited when she must, endured the silence that followed. But the boy's face never left her. At night, when the barracks were quiet, she would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, her hand pressed to the photograph. She heard Hale's words echoing, "It helps us live." She hated him for being right. She hated herself for proving it. And still, she would do it again. Because no medal could capture her. Only the memory of silent tears that carried soldiers back alive. The mission briefing room was dim, only the hum of the projector filling the air. Maps spread across the screen, red circles marking danger zones. The colonel's voice was steady, clipped, as he outlined the route, the objective, the timing. But all she felt was the weight of eyes. Her squad, watching her, even when they tried not to. Every glance carried something different now. Gratitude, unease, dependence, fear. They trusted her aim more than they trusted their own heartbeat, but they no longer knew what lived behind her silence. She didn't look up, just studied the maps, her jaw tight, fingers brushing against the pen in her hand. When the briefing ended, Hale caught her shoulder as the others filed out. His grip was firm, grounding. "They're starting to wonder," he said quietly. Her eyes flicked to his. "About what?" His stare was steady, unflinching. "If you still see people or just threats." Her chest tightened. She looked away, pulling free. "Does it matter?" "It will." Hale's voice carried no judgment, just inevitability. That night before departure, she sat alone, cleaning her rifle under the low light of a flickering bulb. Her hands moved automatically, every piece familiar, every motion precise. But her thoughts tangled. Her brother's face again. Always, the boy, the silence afterward. The squad's nods, their unspoken thanks, their unease. Did she still see people? Or had she buried herself so deep in the act of survival that she no longer knew? The transport jolted as it moved out. The desert wind seeped through cracks, hot and dry. The squad shifted in their seats, checking gear, tightening straps. No one spoke. She felt it then, the shift, not the usual tension before contact. This was heavier, more personal. Their silence wasn't fear of the enemy, it was fear of her. When the convoy stopped, the squad spread into position. The village ahead was quiet, too quiet. Sunlight baked the sand, heat waves blurring the distance. She climbed into her perch, a crumbling rooftop overlooking the street, rifle steady, breath slow. Through her scope the world sharpened, every detail alive. Children darted between alleys, women carried baskets, men lingered in shadows. Her finger rested near the trigger, but she didn't fire. She just watched, eyes tracing movement, searching for the wrong detail, the silent signal, the hint of danger. Minutes dragged into hours. Sweat ran down her back. Her muscles ached, but she stayed still, waiting, watching. Then she saw it. A man stepping from a doorway, hands too still, eyes too cold, a glint of metal beneath his robe. Her breath caught. She tracked him through the scope. Below, her squad moved closer, unaware, vulnerable. She could fire, end it, save them again. But something in his face stopped her. It wasn't rage, it wasn't zeal, it was fear, raw, human. Her finger trembled. Through the scope she saw his lips move, words too quiet to hear, a prayer, a warning. "Take the shot," Hale's voice crackled over comms, calm, certain. She froze, the memory of her brother slammed into her, his smile, his laugh, his voice telling her he'd come home. Her chest ached. "Take the shot," Hale repeated, sharper now. Her hands shook, her vision blurred. She blinked, forced herself steady, exhaled. And fired. The man crumpled. The glint of metal clattered to the ground. A detonator. The squad froze, staring down at the body, at the object near his hand. Her breath came ragged, chest heaving. The silence over comms was deafening. Then finally Hale's voice confirmed he was wired. Relief flooded the squad. One soldier muttered a curse, another whispered thanks. But no one looked up toward her perch. Not this time. When they returned to base, the squad dispersed quickly, each man retreating into himself. No nods, no words of gratitude, just silence. She sat alone in the barracks, hands gripping the photograph so tightly the edges bent. Her brother's face blurred through tears she refused to let fall. Did she save them? Yes, again. But all she felt was hollow. Later that night, Hale found her outside, sitting on the steps under the weight of the stars. He sat beside her, close enough to share the silence. "You hesitated," he said softly. Her throat tightened. She couldn't deny it. "I saw his face," she whispered. Hale nodded slowly. "And you still fired." She turned, meeting his eyes, searching for judgment. "Do you wonder too?" He didn't answer at first, then finally, "Every day." The words hung in the air, heavier than any order, any mission, any silence. Because it meant she wasn't alone. And yet she was. The squad would keep following her aim, trusting her silence, fearing the weight behind it. But her heart knew the truth. No metal could capture her, only the memory of silent tears that carried soldiers back alive. The storm came without warning. Winds howled across the desert, whipping sand into the sky, turning daylight into a burning haze. The convoy crawled forward, engines straining, headlights cutting through a world of dust and shadows. She sat in the lead vehicle, rifle across her knees, helmet visor down. The air inside was thick with tension. Visibility was gone, radios crackled with static, and every man knew this was the kind of cover enemies prayed for. Her heart thudded in her chest, steady, heavy. Something was wrong. She felt it before she saw it, that cold shift in her gut, the same instinct that had saved them before. She peered through the window, eyes narrowing against the storm. Shadows moved in the haze, too smooth, too deliberate. "Ambush," she breathed. The first blast shook the earth. Fire roared, metal screamed. The second vehicle in the convoy was torn apart, smoke and flame swallowed by the sandstorm. "Contact, contact." Gunfire erupted from the storm, muzzle flashes flickering like lightning. The squad scrambled, returning fire, their voices sharp with panic. She dropped low, rifle raised, scanning the blur. Shapes darted, weaving between walls of dust. Every shot she took was half-blind, guided by instinct. One fell, another ducked away. But then, a scream, a soldier down. Through the chaos, she saw him, one of the younger ones, clutching his side, blood pouring through his fingers. He was exposed, lying in the open between vehicles, rounds kicking up dirt around him. Her breath caught, her scope locked. And there, the shooter, Hidden in the storm, rifle raised, bead fixed on the wounded soldier. She had the angle, one shot, one squeeze and he would be safe. But she froze. Because in the swirl of dust the shooter's face flickered into focus. Young, barely older than her brother, eyes wide with fear, lips trembling as he steadied his aim. Her finger hovered, shaking. Not again, not another boy. Her chest tightened, breath ragged. She couldn't, not this time. Take him, Hale's voice roared over comms. She didn't move. The shot came, but not hers. The enemy's round struck. The young soldier jerked, blood spraying, his scream cutting off as he collapsed. Her heart shattered. Too late, she fired. The enemy crumpled, but it was nothing, an echo, a hollow victory. The squad dragged the wounded soldier back, desperate hands pressing against the bleeding, shouts overlapping, panic raw and choking. But it was no use. His eyes glazed, his breath faltered, and in minutes he was gone. Because she hesitated. Because she saw her brother. The storm raged on, but inside her, silence swallowed everything. When it was over, when the last shots faded, when the ambushers fled into the storm, when the convoy limped back toward base, the squad didn't look at her. Not once. The silence was heavier than grief. That night the barracks felt colder than the desert outside. She sat on her bunk, rifle dismantled before her, but her hands didn't move. They just trembled, useless, empty. The photograph lay beside her. Her brother's smile burned into her eyes, into her veins, into her failure. Hale stood in the doorway watching. His face was carved from stone. You saw him, didn't you? His voice was low. She didn't answer, couldn't. You saw your brother. Her throat closed, her eyes brimmed. For the first time she let it out, her voice cracked, broken. I thought I could carry it, all of it, but I can't, Hale, I can't do this anymore. Her hands shook as she clutched the photograph, knuckles white, tears blurring the image. He's in every face, every single one. And I let him die. I let our brother die all over again. Hale stepped forward, kneeling in front of her, his hands gripping hers. Firm, unyielding. You didn't let him die. You saved us, again and again. You've carried more than anyone should, but today, his voice faltered just for a moment. Today it cost us, and it will again if you keep fighting ghosts instead of enemies. Her chest heaved. The weight of his words crushed her, but also cut through the fog. She wanted to argue, wanted to deny it, but she couldn't because he was right. The silence stretched, broken only by her ragged breaths. Finally she whispered, then what am I, Hale, a savior, a curse? Both. He held her gaze steady. You're human, that's all, and that's the hardest thing to be out here. His words lingered, sinking deep. But nothing could erase the boy's face, or the soldier's last breath, or the silence that followed her hesitation. She turned back to the photograph, brushing her thumb across the fading smile. No medal could capture her, only the memory of silent tears that carried soldiers back alive. And the weight of the ones she didn't. The last chapter. This isn't about victory, not about medals. It's about closure, her own kind of redemption, paid in silence, sealed in sacrifice. The squad remembers her not with ceremony, but with the weight of what she carried for them. Here's the conclusion of no medal could capture her, only the memory of silent tears that carried soldiers back alive. The base was quiet the night she made her choice. Outside the wire, the desert stretched endless, stars scattered like glass across black velvet. The wind whispered through broken fences, carrying with it the memory of every step, every voice, every silence. Inside the barracks, she sat on her bunk, rifle beside her, helmet resting at her feet. The photograph lay in her hands, her brother's smile, his eyes, his promise to come home. She traced the edges with her thumb, as if touch could keep him alive a little longer. She thought of the young soldier, the one she hadn't saved. She thought of the man in the storm, his fear, his trembling lips. She thought of the countless faces she had ended before they could end her squad. It was too much, too many ghosts. The door creaked. Hale stepped in, his shadow long in the low light. He didn't speak at first, just stood there watching, the silence between them louder than words. Finally he said, "There's another op." Her chest tightened. She didn't ask what. She already knew, the kind that didn't come back, the kind they sent only those who could carry the impossible. She lifted her gaze. His eyes told her everything. Command wanted her, again. Her voice was quiet, raw. "And you?" "I'll go if you do." His answer was steady, no hesitation. Something broke inside her then, not with pain but with a strange, aching peace. She looked back at the photograph. For the first time she slipped it into her rifle case, not her pocket. Because this time, she wasn't carrying it for herself. The mission was simple on paper. A high-value target, deep in enemy territory, extraction uncertain. They moved under cover of darkness, the squad tighter than ever, every step deliberate, every breath shallow. She led, as always, her eyes cutting through the night, her silence guiding them like a compass. Hours bled into hours. The village loomed ahead, shadows thick, danger alive in every doorway. They breached quietly, steel and breath moving as one. And then chaos. Gunfire erupted, echoing through narrow alleys. Shouts split the air. The squad scattered into positions, trading fire, hearts pounding. She moved instinctively, covering them, every shot precise, every decision weighted. Hale was at her side, voice steady through comms, anchoring her like always. But then she saw it. The trap. Enemies pouring in from the rooftops, the alleys, the shadows, too many. Surrounding, closing. Her heart seized. If they stayed, they would all die. She didn't think, she just knew. "This way," she ordered, breaking the silence. Her voice cut sharp, commanding. The squad followed without question. Down a narrow alley, through a collapsing courtyard, toward the edge of the village. But the enemy pressed harder, bullets chewing stone, grenades rattling earth. And she realized the squad wouldn't make it unless someone stayed, unless someone held the line. Her chest ached, her throat burned, but there was no hesitation this time. She stopped, turned, raised her rifle. Hale caught it instantly. "No, don't you dare." She met his eyes, calm now, steady. "You'll get them out, that's what matters." His face hardened, desperate. "We can fight through." "You know we can't." Her voice was quiet, certain. For the first time, her silence broke with truth. She stepped back deeper into the shadows, rifle at her shoulder. "Go, Hale, now." He shook his head, jaw tight, eyes burning. But then another burst of gunfire tore the wall near his face, and he knew. Slowly, painfully, he nodded. Their eyes locked one last time. No words, no promises, just understanding. Then he turned, shouting for the squad, leading them forward, away from her, toward life. She stayed. Her rifle barked, round after round, every shot buying them seconds. Every second another breath, another chance. Her body ached, blood hot in her veins, but she didn't stop, didn't waver. She saw the photograph in her mind, her brother's smile, the soldier she hadn't saved, the boy with the detonator. And she whispered to them all, "This is for you." The last grenade landed near her feet. She didn't run. Light, sound, silence. When the squad made it back, battered but alive, Hale was the one who carried her rifle. The photograph was still inside the case, untouched, waiting. They didn't speak of medals, didn't speak of glory. They spoke of her silence, of the way it carried them home, of the tears they never saw but knew were there. And in the quiet of the barracks, when the lights were low and the desert wind whispered through the night, they remembered her not as a weapon, not as a ghost, but as a soldier who gave them life. No medal could capture her. Only the memory of silent tears that carried soldiers back alive. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. and leaves behind a silence that never fades.